The best spell solver at Gringotts, archaeologist in the wizarding world, professor of ancient magic at Hogwarts, destroyer of pure-blooded supremacy, and nemesis of Severus Snape, Toby Heimer. Keywords of the novel. Hogwarts Archaeologist No pop-up, Hogwarts Archaeologist Complete Collection Download TXT, Hogwarts Archaeologist Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1. The Curse Solver and Old Classmates. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The Curse Solver and Old Classmates, Hoo. A series of hurried footsteps rang out in the dark corridor, and under the dim torches on both sides of the corridor, a face covered in dust and sweat quickly flashed by. Scattered long hair fluttered back and forth, dirty and knotted. And behind him, there were countless bandaged faces. All mummies, they came back to life. Hurry up. Al, haven't you found the exit yet? The man shouted anxiously. Suddenly, a dark shadow passed in front of him, which was a sniffer. Sniff quickly sniffed on the ground and immediately pointed a direction in front of the fork in the road. Well done. The man made Al jump onto his shoulder, changed direction, ran desperately, and finally saw the light at the exit from a distance. With a sudden leap, the man reappeared in the scorching sunlight. But it's not over yet, the fierce mummy is still chasing him closely, about to run out of the tall pyramid as well. The man calmly took out his wand and just waved it above the exit, causing the embedded stone door to fall back down. The stone gate plummeted with a loud roar, blocking all the roars inside the pyramid. A mummy was smashed and its head split, with its head falling from the sky in front of the man. Goodbye. The man chuckled and kicked his dry head, causing it to crash into the stone gate and immediately shatter into pieces. Then he grabbed the struggling Sniff and dug into its belly pocket, taking out a pure gold mask. This mask is very similar to the pharaoh mask of ancient Egypt, with facial features carved on it, but there is no more complex decoration around it, only the size of an ordinary mask. Finally found it. The man picked up the mask and gave it a fierce kiss, then threw it back in front of Sniff. Sniff quickly stuffed the mask into his pocket, afraid of being taken away by the man again. The man looked at it contemptuously, but Sniff jumped back onto his shoulder without any concern, pretending nothing had happened. Let's go. The man patted his sniffing head and said, gradually walking towards the outside of the pyramid. Guling Egypt branch. Since the dusty man walked into the bank, he has almost caught everyone's attention. Most of them are fairies, with envy, jealousy, and disbelief in their eyes. You're actually still alive. The fairy behind the counter exclaimed in surprise, tightly gripping the gemstone in his hand. The guest beside him looked at him with a worried expression, hesitating whether to stop him. I disappointed you. The man shook his hair and said, using his palm to stroke his long hair towards the back of his head. I'm here to see Larry. After a moment of pause, the man added with emphasis, now. Not long after, the man was welcomed into a beautifully decorated reception room, where a fairy was already sitting on the sofa, wearing a gemstone ring on his fingers and a cigar in his mouth. He is Larry, the fairy manager of this Gringotts. Toby Heimer. The fairy stood up with a smile, as if wanting to give the other person a hug. Even though they looked dirty and smelled of sweat, Larry didn't show any signs of annoyance. My best spell solver, you have been missing for a whole month. Let me see what surprises you have brought me this time. Toby didn't let the other person hold him, nor did he hand over his golden mask. Instead, he took out a crumpled letter from his pocket. What is this? Larry was stunned. Toby grinned at the corner of his mouth, revealing his pale teeth. My resignation letter. He threw the letter forward and before Larry could reach out his hands, it fell under his feet. I'm not doing it, Larry. As Toby was about to leave, Larry quickly stopped him and said, Hey. Toby. This joke is not funny at all. Maybe we can talk about your salary again. Double it. How about double it? Triple it. Hey. Hey. At least tell me why you're resigning. Because I found a new job. Toby said without looking back, and Al made a face at Larry on his shoulder, sticking out his tongue. New job. Larry stuttered, did headquarters poach you? How many benefits did those damn misers promise you? Not much. Toby finally stopped, turned around, and said in a contemptuous tone, the ferry supervisor at headquarters really wants me. Maybe he promised a higher salary, but Gringotts is no longer enough to attract me. The place I am about to go is the greatest magic school in the world. Hogwarts. Vale Bar. This is the only wizard bar in Egypt, serving guests from the wizarding world. The bar has been cast the Muggle Destroyer curse, and Muggles cannot see this building. The owner of the bar is named Witch, just like Larry, he is also a fairy and a difficult to deal with fairy. Just look at the guests at the bar and you'll know that vampires, werewolves, female yaks, and even giants are all bad guys to deal with, but even so, they dare not cause trouble in the bar. Because Witch is not only involved in the bar business, but also in the black market, specifically responsible for selling stolen goods and buying and selling prohibited items. He has a group of powerful subordinates who oversee the rules of the black market. Toby, who had not yet washed up, walked into the bar. The stench on his body caused a lot of disgust from the guests, but they seemed to have been accustomed to it for a long time. No one said anything to drive Toby away, only dared to curse and curse in his heart, damn Toby. He must have gotten rich again. As a regular customer, Toby naturally sat at an empty table and shouted to the waitress, a large pineapple pizza, a large glass of lemon water, and a large steak, medium rare. He smashed his mouth. Al obediently extended a hand and muttered a series of incomprehensible words. Toby smiled and added, give Al another large serving of multi-flavored beans. He loves this one the most. Maiwa blew Toby a kiss, and Al was not spared. At this moment, a fairy wearing a suit and vest sat opposite Al, who was the owner of the Vale Bar, Witch. I thought you were dead and missing for a whole month. As soon as he came up, he said, pushing a piece of paper in front of Toby. I won't even die if you die. Toby picked up a piece of paper with a person's name written on it. Montague Fletcher. Waichi calmly explained, when you arrive in the UK, come find him. This person will help you sell the stolen goods and also make it convenient for you to buy some prohibited items on the black market. Is this person reliable? This joke is not funny at all. The belief that the black market is not reliable comes from people living in darkness. I'll send you another additional message. Which continued, the Pig Head Bar is located in Hogsmeade Village, which is not considered a black market, but occasionally attracts some interesting customers. Toby nodded and suddenly laughed, Pig Head Bar. If I had enough pocket money when I was at school, I would have known this news earlier. Which reached out to the bartender and ordered 2 glasses of malted whiskey, pushing one of them towards Toby. Did you really decide to leave? He asked, it's not easy to find a reliable partner like you. Toby didn't answer the question, but said, don't take up any space. I have another guest coming over later, who is my old classmate. I'm still waiting to reminisce with him. The two of them looked at each other in silence for a moment, then drank the wine from their glasses in one gulp, and then Witch shook his head and walked away. Al curiously sniffed the taste of the cup, and it tentatively extended its tongue to lick it. Suddenly, it became wobbly and couldn't even walk steadily. Toby stretched his arms back and forth to prevent Al from accidentally falling to the ground. After not playing this game for too long, the waitress Maiwa walked over with a plate. Wake up, it's time to pay the bill. Toby tapped Al's head and said, as if sensing the atmosphere of impending departure, the drunken Al made an extra generous gesture this time. That's all my money. Toby said angrily, and Maiwa finally lightly kissed Al's head, which made it calm again and stood there dumbfounded for a while. Just as Toby was wolfing down his food, a stranger suddenly walked into the bar. The acquaintances looked at him with unfriendly eyes, only to receive even colder glances. The stranger found Toby and sat opposite him, silently staring at him. Toby just lifted his head and stared at the other person's unchanging hairstyle, always hanging on the side of his face, with an unwashed appearance. He took a sip of lemon water, swallowed the food in his mouth, and gave the other person a frivolous smile. Long time no see, Severus. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Toby Heimer. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Toby Heimer. Severus Snape stared silently at Toby for a moment, as if comparing the messy face in front of him with his memory. I thought you were dead. Snape finally said. Toby shrugged helplessly and said, Why are so many people waiting for me to die today? I should have looked at the star chart before going out. Al nodded vigorously while holding a multi-flavored bean, as if saying, That's it. After noticing Snape's gaze, Toby took the initiative to introduce himself. Its name is Al, it's my pet, and it can also be considered a partner. Compared to ordinary sniffing, it's particularly sensitive to the source of light, which is very important in the exploration of ancient ruins and has saved my life many times. Ancient ruins. Snape sneered with a curved corner of his mouth. Have you not given up on your fanciful ideas and wasted all your time exploring ancient ruins? Ah, Toby countered mercilessly, it's better than joining the Death Eaters. If Lily were still alive, I don't know how she would view you. You. Snape immediately became angry and stared fiercely at Toby. That's better than you, a coward who only knows how to escape. Toby casually buttoned his ear and said, At least I didn't stand against Lily, nor was I an accomplice in killing her. Besides, what happened to cowards? I remember Professor Slughorn also planned to run away. Unlike your initiative to join, we didn't have any plans to help the mysterious man. Snape stared at Toby like he went crazy and said, You're not allowed to mention Lily's name again. Toby raised his eyebrows and said, What's wrong, Severus? What's so excited about? I thought you had forgotten about her long ago. Time has passed, and she and James' children should have grown up too. I still remember the scene when you parted ways. The phrase, mud seed, scolded me too, Severus. Accompanied by the chaotic sound of Ding Lang's hammer, Snape suddenly stood up and lifted the table. Al suddenly jumped onto Toby's shoulder, looking at the spilled beans and loudly attacking Snape, the culprit. The bar owner saw this scene from a distance, and Toby reached out to soothe him. Could you please change the table? Oh yes, another serving of flavored beans, he said as the house elf was cleaning, which walked over and said, I thought you were just a simple nostalgia. Toby smiled at Snape and said, My old classmate is indeed a bit enthusiastic. After all, we haven't seen each other for many years. After the table was replaced, Snape suppressed his anger and sat down again. He glanced at Weichi, who was staring at this place, and said with some meaning, Since graduation, it seems that you have had a lot of experience. Toby casually replied, You too, Severus. This is the first time the two have met since graduating from Hogwarts. Snape stayed in England, while Toby never returned. They are the same class of students at Hogwarts and also from Slytherin College. Snape has been seeking the recognition of pure-blood students during his school years, which is also related to his own love for black magic, which is why he spends his days hanging out with those evil students. But that was not true friendship after all, at least Toby didn't see those friends stand up for Snape when he was bullied by James and the others. And Toby didn't have many friends when he was in school, so he was marginalized. Slytherin College was not favored by students from other colleges, and almost everyone agreed that only bad students would be assigned to Slytherin. In addition, it happened to be during the rise of Voldemort's power, which brought a deeper and more stereotypical bad impression to Slytherin College. However, the students at Slytherin College were not unjustified at all, and many senior students were openly discussing whether to join the Death Eaters. But Toby is different. He had no intention of becoming a Death Eater and was unwilling to serve Voldemort, but he was also not accepted by students from other colleges. Because he was an extremely rare Muggle graduate assigned to Slytherin College for many years. This is simply unimaginable for Toby, and it is also true for others. Slytherin College has always been a school that values bloodline, and pure blood is the supreme honor. How can a mud seed be allowed to enter? This left Toby feeling lost for a long time at the beginning, not because of his Muggle background, but because he couldn't gain recognition. Fortunately, there was magic accompanying him. For Toby, who grew up in the Muggle world, magic is always the most attractive presence to him. This strong interest has enabled Toby to achieve extremely excellent results, whether it is OWL exam or NEWT, his grades in every subject are excellent. This caught his attention, with the best coming from Professor Slughorn. He is a pure-blooded wizard himself, but he does not judge a person based on their bloodline, but rather on whether they are excellent enough and have enough collectible value. Toby's excellent grades have made Professor Slughorn look at him differently, and he is often willing to take advantage of them. But good grades bring not only positive reactions, but also negative ones. Toby was targeted by Voldemort, and the terrifying Dark Lord would rather ignore Toby's bloodline than recruit him. Of course, the means of solicitation are not so friendly. Toby could not possibly agree to Voldemort's recruitment, and the fact that he was born in Muggle cannot be changed. He also cannot agree with Voldemort's philosophy of purifying his bloodline, nor can he forget his own experiences during his student years. Always treat with indifference. Fortunately, Toby's will is strong enough. He has been an orphan since childhood, knowing how to handle himself and how to avoid trouble. This is completely different from another marginal figure. Severus Snape. Many times, in Toby's view, Snape was asking for trouble on his own. Of course, it became difficult to explain this later on, and the hatred between Snape and James had reached an irreconcilable point, making it meaningless to trace the source. They are naturally unwilling to deal with it. Toby is good at observation. He saw from a very early age that Snape liked Lily, but he couldn't say it. As a result, Lily was with James, whom she had always disliked, and gave birth to a savior in the wizarding world, a boy who survived a disaster. Harry Potter. And this Harry happened to be related to the reason Snape went to Egypt. Let's talk about it. Snape questioned in the interviewer's tone, Harry Potter is also going to enroll this year. Are you here specifically for him? For the boy who survived the disaster. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Conversations in the Office. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Conversations in the Office, Harry Potter. Toby gave Snape a sidelong glance and sneered, do you really think that I would believe something like a baby killing a mysterious person? What do you mean? Snape stared at him tightly. Just like what I said, Toby said lazily, I would rather believe it's James, and that one. He curled his lips with a wicked smile and said, the unspeakable women are those who are dying and successfully counterattacking the mysterious man. The baby just survived. Does Harry have any special bloodline? Vampires. Fairies. Even trolls are fine, but he has nothing. He is just a simple and pure wizard. I can't believe so many people believe it. I still remember Professor Dumbledore's expression of disbelief in the letter, which made me think he was controlled by the soul-taking curse. Let's shift the topic to serious matters. Before Snape could recover from his remarks, Toby reached out his palm and swung it up and down twice, saying, where are my application documents? Hurry up and take them out. The principal didn't say I had an additional interview, that's all agreed upon in the letter. Snape didn't move. He frowned tightly and said, that's your reason. How do you explain that lightning scar? I don't care what he does. Toby became increasingly impatient. Maybe he accidentally bumped into the corner of the table. There was no other person present at the time, and no one had seen the scene of the battle with their own eyes. Anything is possible. Hurry up and take out the files. Snape looked at him coldly and said, "Then why do you have to go back to Hogwarts? Aren't you already gone? Why do you still have to go back?" Toby stared at Snape keenly and said, "Aren't you the same, Severus? Don't think I don't know anything. You first became a Death Eater, and then you were successfully exempted from the crime with the guarantee of Principal Dumbledore. Now you keep asking about Harry Potter's situation. How could you care about James's child? This really surprises me. Is it because of Lily? Here you are." Snape suddenly threw a letter in front of Toby and left the bar without looking back. Toby stared at his back, lost in thought. After returning to Hogwarts, Snape stormed into the principal's office in a fit of rage. Arrogant, and with that damn sharpness. He paced back and forth in front of Dumbledore, adding a negative adjective every time he mentioned Toby. I knew he always pretended to be good when he was in school, this hypocritical guy. I have already understood this matter, Severus. Dumbledore was flipping through a book Snape had never seen before, and without looking up, he said, "I originally planned to incorporate Toby into the Order of the Phoenix, so that I could better protect him within Voldemort's sphere of influence, but in the end, it was unsuccessful. Toby is an extremely determined person who rarely changes his mind, but hides it beneath his calm exterior until he chooses to leave England and embark on adventures exploring the rarely visited ancient ruins." Dumbledore closed the book and spread it on the table, and Snape finally saw what the book was, Ancient Magic. By Toby Heimer. Snape took the book and said, "Is this written by Toby?" "That's right," Dumbledore said calmly. "He also plans to use this book as a textbook for a lesson in ancient magic. Undoubtedly, this will turn the book's sales from dismal to bestseller, and I can't help but doubt that this is also why Toby insisted on choosing this book as his textbook." Snape flipped through a few pages casually. Ancient magic recorded, magical changes in the wizarding world, magic formations, non-existence, wandless magic, magical rituals. He found that the content inside was mostly endless and disorganized, even some adventure experiences were like this. Ancient magic. Snape sneered, "His level is basically like this, forgetting almost everything he learned in school, and even his writing skills have greatly decreased." "I don't think so," Dumbledore said. "If you look closely, you'll find that Toby has had an extremely rich experience over the years, traveling non-stop in various countries. Although he has always been just a lowly cursor, that identity is clearly used for the convenience of exploring relics. As a future colleague, I strongly recommend that you read this book carefully." Snape looked up at Dumbledore and said, "Are you serious? I remember Toby had a big argument with you before leaving. He didn't leave voluntarily, but was driven away by you. Are you planning to recruit him back now?" "But it was just when Harry Potter was about to start school." "If you're worried that Toby might have ulterior motives towards Harry," Dumbledore said calmly, "then you can rest assured, Severus." The drawer of the table suddenly opened, and many letters floated out in a row, scattered before Snape's eyes. "These are all the employment applications that Toby has written for me," Dumbledore explained. "Since the year Voldemort was defeated, these applications have not been interrupted." Snape looked coldly at Dumbledore and said, "Since the year the Dark Lord was defeated. Do you know that when you say that, Toby seems more like a coward?" "Ah, Severus," Dumbledore looked a bit surprised. "I really didn't know you could help Toby talk." Snape snorted and Dumbledore continued to smile, "But as I said, Toby is an extremely determined wizard who rarely changes his mind and has reasons to do so. Voldemort's efforts to attract Toby are very rare, and staying in England does not benefit him at all. Very rare." Snape stared closely at Dumbledore. "Does this also have anything to do with the reason you insist on driving him away?" Dumbledore admitted candidly, "Yes, Severus, I had to do the same. Some of Toby's ideas seemed extremely terrifying to me. At that time, we were facing an impending war, and the final outcome proved to be even more tragic than we had imagined. Many wizards lost their lives, Burns, James, and so on. That's enough. Snape's tone abruptly interrupted Dumbledore, causing a low hiss in the portrait. It's really impolite, said Daisy Devant with a frown. After a brief silence, Snape finally asked, if that's the case, why do you still call Toby back? Dumbledore smiled gently and said, in fact, I am also waiting for Toby to personally give me a satisfactory answer. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Quirrell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Quirrell. On the bustling streets, Harry looked uneasy, with a hint of disbelief still lingering on it. He felt like he was dreaming these days, when a large group of owls suddenly appeared, followed by the little giant in front of him. Surprisingly, he was still some strange wizard. Vaguely, Harry felt as if his dream had come true. Can becoming a wizard get rid of the Vernon family? If this is a dream, then Harry really hopes he will never wake up. We're here. Hagrid stopped and stood in front of a dirty, small bar. Harry was surprised to find that passers-by seemed to be unable to see the bar. The Broken Cauldron Bar, Hagrid introduced, is a very famous bar, but you should remember that even in the wizarding world, minors are prohibited from drinking unless you have a giant bloodline. Harry felt that Hagrid was just trying to justify himself, but he decided not to say that out loud. Let's go. Hagrid smiled and pushed Harry into the bar, but as a famous place, it was too dark and dirty. Several old ladies sat in the corner, holding small glasses of sherry, one of whom was smoking a long cigarette. A little man wearing a top hat is chatting with the bar owner who has almost lost all his hair and looks like a shrunken walnut. There is also a guest with long hair, black hair hanging down from both sides, blocking his face and making it difficult to see what he looks like. Harry inexplicably felt that the other person was staring at him, which made him feel a bit uneasy and fearful, and he felt a sense of being targeted. As soon as Hagrid entered the bar, many people greeted him, but Harry noticed that the man did not do so. He was slowly drinking a transparent drink, and there seemed to be some small animal eating on the table. Harry tried hard not to think about strange breeds, and the owl that could deliver letters was already strange enough. The bar owner picked up a cup and said, as usual, Hagrid. No, Tom, I'm doing something for Hogwarts. Hagrid patted the bar owner's shoulder with his giant palm, almost crushing him down. Oh my goodness, the bar owner looked at Harry carefully and said, This is probably. The Broken Cauldron Bar was silent for a moment. Oh my, the bar owner whispered, Harry Potter. It's a great honor. It seemed like in an instant, many people warmly greeted Harry, their eyes filled with reverence and excitement, tears streaming down their eyes, as if everyone knew him. Harry didn't know what to say. His arm had never been lowered since he lifted it up, and several people were still greeting him repeatedly. This was really inexplicable. Compared to when he was at the Vernon family, it was completely unimaginable. Does his cousin Dudley know how popular he is? If he knew, would he still dare to bully himself like that? Toby didn't get up or move, he just looked at the scene from afar, at Lily and James's children from afar, and also saw the lightning scar on Harry's forehead. If it weren't for this scar, would the wizarding world still see Harry as the savior who defeated Voldemort? A sudden idea came to Toby's mind. Perhaps so. Voldemort has been defeated, and the wizarding world also needs a hero, even if it's just a newborn baby. However, judging from Harry's attire, it seems that he hasn't been doing well these years. Toby is not unfamiliar with Harry's clothing styles, all of which don't fit well. When he was a child, he wore these cheap clothes that were sturdy and durable, and only needed to buy one to wear for many years. At this moment, a pale-faced young man walked around Toby and approached Harry with a very nervous expression, one eye twitching. Professor Quirrell. Hagrid said, Harry, Professor Quirrell is one of the teachers who taught you at Hogwarts. Bo Potter, Professor Quirrell stuttered as he grabbed Harry's hand, I'm thrilled to see you have something indescribable. What kind of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell? Black magic defense, Professor Quirrell said vaguely, as if he thought it was better not to mention it. You don't need to learn it anymore, do you, Mr. Bo Potter? He laughed nervously. Toby set his gaze on Quirrell, and since he noticed Quirrell, his gaze had not shifted. As the crowd gathered more and more, Hagrid had to raise his voice and say, "It's time to go, there's still a lot of things to buy. Let's go, Harry." Hagrid led Harry through the bar and into a small courtyard surrounded by walls, disappearing in front of everyone. Quirrell walked cautiously back to his seat, looking indeed very timid. "Professor Quirrell." A sudden sound startled Quirrell. He turned his head and saw a man with curly hair, his eyes obscured behind his hair. The blurry gaze made the person look erratic and full of uncertain threats. "Are you?" Quirrell hesitated and asked. He didn't know the other person and had never seen this guest before. "Hello." Toby showed a big smile as he used his palm to stroke his hair behind his head, revealing a sharp and angular face that looked very friendly and handsome. "I am also a new professor at Hogwarts, an archaeologist named Toby Heimer. This is your seat. Since we are future colleagues, why not have a good conversation?" Before Quirrell could refuse, Toby had already picked up lemonade and walked to an empty spot at Quirrell's table to sit down. Sniff Owl was very conscious and asked Toby to help him carry the plate over so that he could continue to enjoy the BB-flavored beans. Quirrell was stunned. He vaguely felt something was wrong with the other person, but couldn't say exactly what was wrong. "All right then," Quirrell stuttered as he just wanted to quickly check out and leave. But Toby clearly didn't think so. He enthusiastically asked, "Are you the new professor?" Quirrell shook his head and said, "I used to teach Muggle research, which was a subject that only changed this year, black magic defense." Toby said happily, "That's really good. I'm in charge of teaching a lesson on ancient magic." "Ancient magic?" Quirrell stopped stuttering. "Does Hogwarts have this course? How come I don't remember learning it?" "Of course not," Toby shook his head and said, "as an archaeologist, I don't have much choice. Ancient magic is the most suitable course for me. This is the result of my hard work, otherwise I would have to teach defense against black magic." When Toby said this, he looked at Quirrell with a deadly gaze. Quirrell deeply realized this, even if he wasn't looking at dead people, he was definitely looking at some unlucky person. He is the unlucky guy. "What's wrong with black magic defense?" Quirrell anxiously asked. Toby sighed deeply, as if regretting Quirrell in advance. "Do you really not know?" Toby deliberately lowered his voice and asked, "You should also have graduated from Hogwarts, right?" Quirrell quickly nodded. "You should be clear about that," Toby said in confusion. 7 academic years, 7 professors have changed completely. Don't you think there's anything wrong with this? Quirrell widened his eyes in fear and said, "What's wrong?" Toby's voice suddenly fell even lower. "Defense against the dark arts class, this course is cursed, every professor must die hard." "What?" Quirrell exclaimed in shock, catching the attention of many guests. "Keep it down," Toby quickly stopped. "We are future professors. How can we spread negative news about the school on such occasions? This will affect the enrollment volume." Quirrell couldn't even hear what Toby was saying, his face turned pale and sweat oozed from his forehead. No. Quirrell finally realized, when I was at school, there was no news of the professor's death. "Of course not everyone is like this," Toby said calmly, "but at least it will be unlucky for a while, a lot of bad luck. If you can't bear it, then." He tilted his neck and stuck out his tongue. "It's so hard to die. Me. Quirrell suddenly became extremely anxious. He stood up, but couldn't even speak completely. He held it for a long time before saying one sentence. "I have to go." He hurriedly pulled out a few silver coins and ran out of the Broken Kettle bar without looking back. He also tripped over the threshold and almost fell. Toby stared silently at his back, his hair that had been pulled back to the back of his head hanging down again, blocking his view. Sniffing and chirping twice, Toby seemed to be either answering or muttering to himself, "I feel a strong threat from Quirrell. You know, Al, this is one of my few divination talents that has allowed us to successfully escape multiple times while exploring the ruins. This time, perhaps it's no exception. Professor Quirrell." Toby carefully recalled Quirrell's ordinary, even timid expression. He concluded by saying, "What an excellent performance technique. The guy who dares to teach the defense against dark arts class. It's really not easy." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Guling Pavilion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Guling Pavilion. Please come in, stranger, but be careful, what will happen to insatiable greed? Just take, get for nothing. I will definitely receive the harshest punishment. This is the text engraved on the silver gate, which makes Harry tremble with fear. As I said, if you want to rob this bank, then you're crazy, Hagrid said. The fairy welcomed them inside, which was a tall marble hall. Harry was dazzled by the fact that there were about 100 fairies sitting on high stools behind a row of long counters. Some were weighing coins on copper scales, some were inspecting gemstones with their goggles, and some were hastily registering in the large ledger. In addition, there are countless doors in the hall that lead to unknown directions. "Good morning," Hagrid said to an idle fairy, "we need to withdraw some money from Mr. Harry Potter's vault. Do you have his key, sir?" Hagrid was hurriedly taking out the key from his pocket. There were so many things inside, as well as a moldy dog biscuit. Harry really wished his key hadn't gone moldy. He looked to the right and saw a fairy weighing a pile of rubies the size of a burning red coal block. How much should it be worth? If it were changed to cake and soda, it would probably make Dudley unable to finish it for a lifetime. Again, what are you fooling around with? Hagrid's big palm flapped back and forth in front of Harry a few times, blowing up all of his remaining sea, with a wind force the size of a small fan. "It's time to go," Hagrid couldn't help but show off again. "First, go to your vault, and then to the 713 vault. The task Dumbledore gave me must be completed." "What's inside there?" Harry asked. "I can't tell you this," Hagrid put his finger to his mouth. "This is absolutely confidential and I can't tell you." Harry's curiosity was quickly drawn to the narrow corridor behind the door, and the burning torch illuminated it brightly. Shirlang is a steep downhill road with a small railway below. The leading fairy blew a whistle and a small cart rushed towards them along the railway. They climbed onto the car and then set off like flying. Not long after they left, Toby also walked into Gringotts with Al. He walked straight to the counter and said to the fairy, 714 treasure, take something. He did not take out the key, and the fairy only carefully examined Toby's face. "It's really you, Mr. Toby Heimer. Are you interested in taking on the spell solver?" "No." "Okay, give it a try and you'll never lose out." "Lotsie." A fairy named Lotsie walked over and respectfully said, "Please come with me, sir." Toby followed behind Lazy and they walked into the room next to Harry just now. After the cart appeared, Toby skillfully sat on it, while Al held on to his hair tightly. "Let's go," said Lotsie. At first, they raced along a maze-like winding passage, turning left, right, and so on, repeating countless times. The cold air howled past, and Toby's eyes narrowed slightly, protecting Al, who was shivering from the cold with his collar. They passed by an underground lake and saw flames spewing out at the end of the passage. "Is that a dragon?" Toby asked. "Yes, sir," Lotsie replied, "Ukraine's iron belly is strong enough to keep any intruders out. I know I can't hide this from you, but I hope it's best not to spread it." Toby nodded lightly and didn't say anything. Gradually, the cold wind became piercing, and Toby protected Al on his chest, blocking it with both hands. Finally, after an unknown amount of time, they stopped at the mountain stream. Lotzi walked to the door of the vault and gently tapped with a long finger, causing the door to slowly disappear. Then he moved away, but Toby didn't move. He patted Al's head and immediately jumped down with a sniff, swimming well among the piles of gold coins for a while. "Stop playing," Toby said helplessly, "hurry up and put the things away." Al reluctantly started working. In addition to piles of Garan, Seiko, and Nate, there was also a row of things wrapped in cloth bags in the vault, each tightly sealed with numerical symbols left by black feather pen handwriting. Al took out another tied cloth bag from his pocket and placed it at the end, with the largest number marked on it .7. "I thought you would hand over all the items to Gringotts," Lotzi suddenly said. Toby glanced at him and said, "It's just some souvenirs, not a creation of fairies." Lotzi didn't speak anymore. As employees of Gringotts, they are just custodians of wealth, without the right or the ability to carefully examine what the employer has hidden in the vault. They won't do this. Neither wizards nor the Ministry of Magic will allow such behavior. After all, in a fairy rebellion, the fairy is the losing side, not the winner. After carefully placing the number 7 cloth bag, Al began frantically stuffing gold jargon into his pocket, ignoring both silver and bronze knight. Toby waited patiently, and Lotzi showed no signs of impatience. At this moment, Harry and Hagrid, who were still in a state of sudden wealth, also rushed to the adjacent vault. Harry saw this strange man at a glance, and he remembered seeing him at the Broken Cauldron bar. "Hey!" Hagrid wondered, "Who is that?" The pull ring next to him remained silent, and the fairy would not reveal the identity of other employers. Harry, however, whispered a few words under his feet. So coincidental. Hagrid suddenly became wary. It's a bit strange to encounter this person twice in a row. The things in the vault are tasks that Dumbledore specifically assigned to him, so there must be no mistakes. However, the man in the distance suddenly smoothed his hair back with his palm, and Toby greeted with a smile, "Long time no see, Hagrid." "You are." Hagrid carefully recognized the other person's face and exclaimed in surprise, "Toby. Toby Heimer. You're still alive." Toby felt like he really should have gone out after watching the stars. "Hey." Hagrid waved his hands vigorously, but there was a deep abyss between the two vaults. The pull ring immediately grabbed Hagrid and he dragged him for a short distance. "Hagrid. Hagrid. Are you looking for death?" Toby was also startled. Hagrid is really the same, he hasn't changed for so many years. "There will be a chance to meet in the future," he shouted loudly. Hagrid just stopped. Yes, he still has the task assigned to him by Dumbledore. He quickly took out the things from the vault and carefully placed them in his pocket. On the other side, Al finally couldn't fit anything in. It swayed and walked over, and Toby had to shake it several times to make Al's body relaxed again. 2 carts set off at the same time, with Hagrid and Harry's one hanging far behind Toby. Who is Toby? Harry couldn't help but wonder. "Don't ask me now," Hagrid's face turned pale. "I'll talk about it when I go out. I feel like I'm going to vomit." As a result, he really vomited. The cart had to stop for a while, and the pull tab and Harry jumped up to pat Hagrid's back. On the other cart, Lotzi shouted loudly, "Keep an eye on your pet, sir. We're going to pass by the fire dragon again." "I know." Toby instinctively wanted to grab his left shoulder, but he grabbed it empty. When he turned his head in confusion, he realized that Al appeared at the edge of the cart at some point and was almost thrown out. Toby quickly caught Al back and said, "With your little meat, the dragon won't be able to eat enough." Al didn't react at all. It obediently lay in Toby's arms, motionless, just tightly clutching the pocket on its belly. After finally leaving, Toby didn't stay at Gringotts for too long. He found a quiet and uninhabited spot in Diagon Alley, then turned his head and stared straight at Al. Al whistled nervously, afraid to look at Toby. "Take it out." Toby reached out and said, "Dare to tamper under the fairy's nose. If it weren't for me covering it up for you, you might really have been discovered. Al persisted for a while, but in the end, he reluctantly dug into his pocket and finally took out a bright red gemstone. Just a gem, and you. At the moment of encountering the ruby, Toby suddenly froze and quickly urged, quick. Give me Dumbledore's chocolate frog picture. Alfei quickly searched in his pocket and finally took out a well-preserved chocolate frog picture. Toby quickly reached out and took it. Whether by coincidence or for some other reason, Dumbledore in the picture is glaring at him angrily. Toby silently flipped the picture over and found the desired line of description. Effective alchemy with partner Nicole Lemmy. In addition, Shanghai Gu mentioned the task Dumbledore entrusted to him, as well as the red gemstone in front of him. Toby's throat rolled hard. He asked cautiously, you should have made a switch, right? Stuff the regular ruby back in. Al quickly nodded vigorously, as if inviting credit. You're really going to give me a hard time. Toby sighed and said, just as I was successfully applied for, I have to face such a difficult choice. This is definitely Nick Lemmy's Philosopher's Stone. Al nodded faster, his excited expression was completely like saying, am I impressive? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Return to Hogwarts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Return to Hogwarts. Nick Lemmy's Philosopher's Stone. This means an endless lifespan and countless pieces of gold. Even if Toby were to leave, as long as he could find a foolproof hiding place, he would probably be able to spend the remaining few hundred years in a way that almost all wizards envy. After all, Nick Lemmy and Albus Dumbledore are both very old, so old that no one knows how long they can live. As for the reason why Nick Lemmy handed over the Philosopher's Stone to Dumbledore, it is clearly written on the chocolate frog picture. With his partner Nicole Lemmy, he has achieved remarkable results in alchemy. This may be another collaboration between the two, and the Philosopher's Stone undoubtedly has sufficient research value. Al looked up at Toby, his dark little eyes blinking incessantly. He quietly took a few steps forward, wanting to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone and stuff it back into his pocket. Just know how to cause trouble. Toby pushed Al backwards with his fingers, placed the Philosopher's Stone in the pocket of the witch robe, patted it twice, and ignored Al's struggle, saying, don't be wild. You dare to steal Dumbledore's things, he's still alive, and Hogwarts hasn't become an ancient relic. We don't need to go archaeology now. Don't forget our experiences in Europe over the years, Al. We all know how terrifying an enemy Grindelwald is, but he has already been locked up in Newmontgard, and Voldemort's life and death are unknown in the Wizarding War. Only Dumbledore survived unharmed. Let's go. Toby comforted Al for a while and let it jump onto his shoulder. Al deliberately turned his head and ignored him, still sulking. But Toby insisted, it's time to go to Hogwarts early to report. I had planned to delay for a while longer. But you have given me a reason to have to go see Dumbledore. Toby quickly set off and strode along Diagon Alley without seeing Hagrid and Harry, probably still walking through the hallway. When Toby returned to the Broken Cauldron bar, he unexpectedly discovered that Quirrell had returned. However, just as Quirrell saw Toby, he gave up his small drink and hurriedly ran away. Don't leave. Toby shouted, but Quirrell didn't even turn back. New colleagues are really difficult to deal with. Toby shook his head helplessly and said. He borrowed some flying powder from Tom, the owner of the Broken Cauldron bar, and sprinkled it on the flames in the fireplace, causing a green flame to rise inside. Toby walked straight into the fire, shouted, Hogwarts, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Toby was surrounded by flames, and as he spun at high speed, he vaguely saw some wizarding rooms that flashed by before he could see them clearly. Then he slowed down and Al shook his head vigorously, using his small hands to clean the dust. Finally, Toby appeared in the vice principal's office at Hogwarts, and Professor McGonagall, who was working, glanced at him. Toby also saw him. Long time no see, Professor McGonagall. Yeah, Toby, I thought you were dead. There hasn't been any news for so many years. The two of them were clearly familiar, and Toby walked up and gently hugged Professor McGonagall. He whispered, I'm sorry about the situation with Elphinstone Alcott, Professor. Elphinstone Alcott was Professor McGonagall's former boss in the Ministry of Magic. He pursued McGonagall and spent many years there. Eventually, the two got married in 1982. Unfortunately, in 1985 alone, Elphinstone passed away due to being bitten by a venomous tentacle. Mileva McGonagall's emotional experiences were particularly challenging, and Toby had heard of some of them during school. She was an extremely strong and independent woman. It's all from the past. McGonagall wiped the corner of his eye without a trace and said, Fortunately, there's still Hogwarts, and this is also my home. Toby pretended not to see and looked at the scenery outside the window. Hogwarts is still the same as before, he said, looking at the black lake from a distance, the giant squid stranded on the edge of the lake. Principal Dumbledore has protected the school very well. Professor McGonagall's mood gradually calmed down as she looked up and asked, Are you looking for Albus? Oh, I remember. He just recruited you as the new professor at the school a while ago. I remember Snape even went to Egypt specifically for this, and his mood when he returned was not very good. Toby couldn't help but laugh and said, Severus is still the same. All right, Professor, I have to go see Principal Dumbledore. We'll get together again when we have time and call the other professors, but unfortunately Professor Slughorn is not at school anymore. Albus is in the principal's office, Professor McGonagall said. The password is Ice Mouse. Toby appeared somewhat surprised and said, He still loves sweets so much, he hasn't changed in all these years. He left the vice principal's office and accidentally saw the list of new students on the table. He didn't stop and came to the corridor. It's still a holiday now, and the corridor is empty. Toby thought his memory of Hogwarts had faded away, but whenever familiar scenes reappeared before him, he could always recall some tricks, such as which door to gently poke open when the stairs led there on Friday. Al kept spinning, wanting to see all the scenes. He muttered a few words in Toby's ear, and Toby responded with a smile, Yes, Al, this is Hogwarts, the greatest magic school in the world. No matter what you think, I think it's much better than Vigado. I really can't adapt to the African architectural style. Although the number of students at Hogwarts is almost negligible, Toby still met an old friend. Toby Heimer. A transparent ghost stopped in front of Toby, who looked extremely terrifying, staring at his dull eyes, haggard, and covered in silver blood stains on his robe. This is the ghost of Slytherin Academy, Bloody Barrow. Toby had almost no friends when he was in school, especially when he was young, so he would rather treat Barrow the Blood Man as his friend, even if no one was willing to approach Barrow voluntarily. It's quite pitiful to imagine now, but Snape is even more pitiful than Toby. He doesn't even have friends like Barrow. There was only one Lily, but later they went their separate ways. Long time no see, Barrow. Toby stopped to say hello. Barrow stared straight at him, and just as Toby thought he was about to say, I thought I was dead, Barrow said in a calm tone, It's really regrettable. I originally reserved a spot for you as a college ghost. This is the first time Toby has heard Barrow say such a long sentence. It seems that he is really regretful. The two sides parted ways, and Barrow kept looking back at Toby with a hint of regret in his eyes. Toby instinctively quickened his pace. He had been to the ghost's anniversary party and could not accept the rotten food no matter what. Finally, Toby appeared in front of an incredibly ugly giant stone monster. Ice Mouse. The monster suddenly came to life, jumped to the side, and the wall behind it split in half. Toby walked up the spiral staircase and the wall behind him roared shut. The higher up, the more complicated Toby's mood becomes. He still remembers the argument he had with Principal Dumbledore before leaving England. In an instant, guilt, nervousness, unease, anger, and various emotions formed a more complex psychological state. But when he walked to the last oak door, he found that his heart had become unprecedentedly calm. He gently knocked on the door and heard words coming from inside. "Please come in." After taking a deep breath, Toby pushed the door open and walked into the principal's office. The principal has become older. This was the first thought that came to Toby's mind. Principal Dumbledore was sitting on a chair behind the table, looking down to read a book. His half-moon-shaped glasses were hanging on the bridge of his nose, and behind him was a wise blue gaze. From the cover of the book alone, Toby knew it was his own Ancient Magic. "Bring it over," Dumbledore said without lifting his head, and his fingers lightly tapped the table twice. The principal remained so calm, looking as if he had anticipated everything. In the Wizarding War, he was also so confident that he would achieve ultimate victory. Toby didn't hesitate. He took out the cloth bag from his pocket, folded it twice, exposed the magic stone inside, and gently placed it on his desk. Dumbledore lifted his head and stared at the Philosopher's Stone. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, a full minute had passed, but Principal Dumbledore remained silent and silent. Toby originally lowered his head, but later he couldn't help but lift his head and found that Principal Dumbledore's grip on the book was particularly strong, with veins on the back of his hand. The development of things seemed to be somewhat off, and Toby felt that Dumbledore was trying to suppress the urge to beat himself up. Toby hesitated and asked, "Principal, do I still have a chance to come back in?" End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Dumbledore. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Dumbledore remained silent. Toby has silently planned dozens of escape plans in his heart. No matter from which direction ancient magic was thrown, he is confident that he can successfully avoid it. This is the pride of being an archaeologist. Fortunately, I didn't write this book too thick. Toby secretly felt relieved in his heart. Fortunately, Principal Dumbledore maintained enough grace. He didn't personally teach Toby, the mischievous student, a lesson. Instead, he let out a deep sigh and said, "When I said, 'bring it,' I meant information that wasn't recorded in the book. You really surprise me, Toby. So, have you already met Hagrid?" Al dared not move and was trying to dress up as a pendant. Toby also tried to pretend that nothing had happened and said, "Oh, yes, I have met Hagrid, as well as the children of Harry Potter, Lily, and James. I have also seen him, but he hasn't been doing very well these years and doesn't deserve his status as savior at all." Toby intentionally or unintentionally accused Dumbledore, but Dumbledore just shook his head and said, "This is not as simple as you think, Toby. If possible, I also hope Harry can live a happy life, but..." Toby was carefully listening to every word from Dumbledore, but Dumbledore didn't continue, tickling Toby's heart. "Let's change the topic." Dumbledore looked up and said, staring into Toby's eyes. "Only a few people know that since Voldemort's power disappeared, you have been submitting job applications to me continuously for many years. Can you explain why?" Toby sat across from Dumbledore and suddenly became interested in a silver top, teasing it back and forth with his fingers, saying, "If you have read those employment applications, you should understand that what I said in the letter is very clear. Since leaving Hogwarts, I have finally realized how much wealth I have lost. This is almost the only well-preserved ancient building, and even compared to other magic schools, Hogwarts is the oldest. In addition, its great founders, Godric Gryffindor, Salazar Slytherin, Helga Hufflepuff, and Roina Ravenclaw, under the influence of 4 legendary wizards, have also kept countless secrets in Hogwarts. I dare say that until now, no principal has been able to know all the secrets in the school, even you, Principal Dumbledore. Not to mention the professors and students, and these secrets are deadly to a professional archaeologist. I have visited many countries and explored many ancient magical relics. The pyramids of Egypt, palaces on the Himalayas, cities beneath distant lakes, but I cannot ignore the existence of Hogwarts. One day, I will come back again, sooner or later. Toby spoke calmly, without looking at Dumbledore, who was still watching him. "You're thinking of Hogwarts," Dumbledore said. "Exposing one's true thoughts in front of a principal is not a wise decision. You should know that I will stop you in order to avoid having a negative impact on the students in the school. For example, cursing the treasury has already happened once. The cursed treasure is a special event that lasted for a long time, starting in 1984 and ending completely in 1991. During this period, several students discovered the ice treasure, fear treasure, cursed treasure, and forest treasure. Derived from the mystery plot of the game Hogwarts, the opening of each treasure trove has brought great trouble to Hogwarts. Although Toby did not participate in this series of disputes, the treasure vault incident undoubtedly greatly reduced his chances of successfully becoming a professor. Archaeologist. It sounds like someone who specifically causes trouble. Toby shrugged helplessly and said, "But I do think so. I also know that I can't hide my thoughts from you at all. It would be better to speak up in advance." Dumbledore shook his head and retorted, "But you and I are both aware that this is not all your thoughts. What you are saying now is not as much as what we have communicated back and forth." After a pause, Dumbledore added, "It doesn't include the reasons for our argument many years ago." At the most critical moment of the conversation, the topic inevitably led to the argument. It was precisely because of that argument that Toby decided to leave England. On the one hand, it is to avoid Voldemort's solicitation, and on the other hand, it is also related to his unwillingness to join the Order of the Phoenix. Speaking of which, the reason why Voldemort recruited him is somewhat related to the argument. Toby remained silent for a moment. "You know me, Principal," he whispered. "I cannot give up my pursuit of ancient magic, nor have I given up exploring the reasons for the decline of ancient magic. The level of magic in the wizarding world is gradually decreasing, and I have too many examples to prove this. The transition from wandless magic to wand-based magic, giant-sized guardians, and unprecedented ancient Greek wizards. Even if their influence is excluded, there are many wizards who provide evidence in the duel competition alone, and each game has records, which is the most complete information. You are also aware of this, and I have truthfully told you my own purpose. As long as we understand the reasons for the decrease in magic level and find ways to gradually increase the strength of magic, we can have even stronger power. The so-called wizard wars and mysterious people are not worth mentioning in front of this power." Dumbledore gazed at the steadfast Toby, as time seemed to return to that same night many years ago, also in the same place. In front of his most trusted self, Toby showed extremely strong ambition and ambition. He wants to restore the wizarding world to its rightful level, attempting to trace the origin of magic. In the end, he needs to prove to the entire wizarding world, a Muggle-born person is no different from a pure-blood wizard, even more superior. "I have indeed read your letter." Dumbledore sighed and said, "I really didn't know that the words of comfort in the beginning would lead you in this unknown direction." "But you're right," Toby said immediately. "Even Muggle-born people have the bloodline of wizards, but it took many generations to master magic again, awakening the hidden talents in their bloodline. The so-called Muggle-born people are all descendants of wizards. Especially in earlier times, Muggle-born people were known as Muggles and were more respected than they are now. At that time, wizards believed that Muggle-born people were much more talented than wizards from pure wizarding families. It was not until the implementation of the International Federation of Wizards Confidentiality Act that wizards began to distrust Muggles. Pure-blooded superiority also began to spread, and the term Muggles was gradually abandoned by people." "Toby," Dumbledore suddenly interrupted, "I understand your thoughts. You know I understand you, but you also know how dangerous these thoughts are. Otherwise, Voldemort wouldn't have to recruit you. He wants to master powerful ancient magic and have even greater power. Your research is full of too much uncertainty. At that time, we were in a period of war, and you cannot guarantee that your research results were only beneficial to us. At that time, the entire wizarding world was dominated by pure-blooded superiority. Once wizards found themselves with stronger strength, do you know what they would do? War. Dumbledore looked straight into Toby's eyes and said, a war with a wider scope. They will think that Muggle is not a big deal, so they will declare war on Muggle. Not many people have seen such a war, they have no idea what will happen in the future, but I have seen it firsthand. During the period when Grindelwald led Europe, I witnessed the war in which Muggles and wizards participated together. You can't imagine how brutal it was. But you have to know that even if Grindelwald ultimately failed to win this war, he is a wizard supremacist, but that doesn't mean he will ignore Muggles' threat. On the contrary, he knows how powerful the enemy he is about to face is. But Grindelwald still failed. I dare say that even among all wizards, there is no one who knows Muggle better than him, even if I am included, and even those Death Eaters with pure blood supremacy in their minds, Voldemort is no exception. They will lead wizards towards destruction, and secrecy laws have never been meant to protect Muggles, but rather to protect wizards. Believe me, Toby, I have witnessed war with my own eyes, that's why I stopped you. Believe me, I have witnessed it with my own eyes. Toby remained silent and did not refute. This was the biggest disagreement between him and Dumbledore at the time, and both understood each other. Dumbledore knew that Toby was so persistent because of his school experience, wanting to prove that Muggle-born people are superior to pure-blood wizards. And Toby also knew that Dumbledore was worried that his research would lead the war to a more terrifying direction. Not only would his own wizards become stronger, but the Death Eaters would also become stronger, and their ambitions would also expand. This was very beneficial for pure-blood superiority at the time, and would encourage more wizards to actively join their camp. Until the end, the war between the wizard and Muggle completely broke out. But neither Toby nor Dumbledore can give up their ideas. The saddest part is that all of this started with a comforting statement. Child, I hope you know that even if you are assigned to Slytherin Academy, it doesn't mean you are weaker than those pure-blood wizards. You definitely possess some superior quality, which is why the Sorting Hat assigned you to Slytherin College regardless of your bloodline. Go find this quality and prove your excellence. You're no different. The conversation had reached an irreversible point, and Toby finally stopped playing with the top. He stood up, his long hair hanging in front of him, unable to see the expression on his face clearly. So it seems like I should go now. Toby's tone was incredibly calm. I will come back, Principal. You'd better live longer, the Philosopher's Stone is indeed a good plan. He turned around and strode towards the oak door. Toby. Just then, Dumbledore's voice came from behind him. I have no intention of breaking my promise, as we agreed in advance in our letter. You will still be the new professor at Hogwarts, responsible for the course of ancient magic. As if a gust of wind had blown by, just as Dumbledore blinked, Toby had already returned to his original position. He said with a serious expression, let's talk about the issue of salary, Principal. I used to be the ace curse solver at Gringotts, and my salary was not low at all. By the way, I also want Professor Slughorn's office. I have long coveted that room, and the dean never treats him unfairly. It would be best if he hasn't been asked to leave yet. Of course, if the person occupying it is Severus, I will have a good conversation with him, and I believe he won't refuse the opportunity to give the office to a newcomer. Dumbledore suddenly felt a headache as he rubbed his forehead and said, we can discuss the issue of salary again, and Horace's office can also be given to you. Don't go find Severus, he hasn't completely calmed down until now. His magnanimity is really small. Toby said leisurely, completely devoid of his previous frustration. He even had the mood to ask, do you have lemonade, Principal? I've said so much and I'm almost thirsty. Dumbledore gave a tired snap of his fingers, as he began to miss the serious Toby. Toby first lifted the lemonade to his shoulder and let Al enjoy it, then he bit the straw and glanced at the portraits of previous principals, waving and greeting each one. After finally indulging in the drink, Toby let out a comfortable breath and said, to be honest, Principal, I really planned to leave just now and even thought about how to find a new job. Egypt must not be able to go back. Larry was only rejected by me recently, and I didn't give him a good face. Dumbledore calmly gazed at Toby, his voice gradually fading away, and he awkwardly coughed twice. Have you finished drinking? Dumbledore asked calmly, his tone calm and self-threatening. Toby quickly nodded and said, the lemonade in the principal's office is always the most delicious. Dumbledore's mouth twitched slightly. He picked up the magic stone from the table, stood up, and walked outside. Come with me when you have finished drinking. Toby silently clapped his hands with Al, closely following Dumbledore and curiously asking, where are we going, Principal? Dumbledore did not answer this question, but answered another question in Toby's heart. You must be curious why I agreed to your employment request, right? Toby nodded. From the conversation just now, it seems that the differences between the two have not changed. In other words, Dumbledore could have promised Toby long ago. One of the reasons is that you really listened to my opinion. Dumbledore said calmly, you didn't write all the ideas in Ancient Magic, which is why this book reads so poorly, without a beginning or end. But on the other hand, it also reduces the hidden threat in the wizarding world. What threat? Toby immediately asked in response. The two of them stopped in front of the door of a room on the far right side of the fourth floor. Toby had never entered this classroom before, and he was not even sure if it was a professor. Dumbledore finally said, the threat of attempting to take away the Philosopher's Stone. The door of the house was pushed open, and Toby noticed that there was no powerful protective magic applied, just an unlocking spell was enough. Inside was a dark hall with nothing. Dumbledore opened a trapdoor on the floor and jumped in with Toby. Then they walked through several rooms one after another, and Toby's most memorable one was the chessboard room. He had never seen such a huge wizard's chess before, and playing it must be very shocking. Finally, Toby and Dumbledore stopped in the last room, where there was nothing left and, like many other rooms, all the decorations had not been completed yet. These houses give Toby a strong sense of sight, as he has explored many ancient relics, some of which require overcoming one level after another, ultimately reaching the end of victory. It could be an unknown treasure, or it could just be an empty room with nothing to gain. You ask me why I agreed to you. Dumbledore turned around, his gaze behind the lenses incredibly complex, full of indescribable meaning. But without a doubt, Toby saw guilt inside. Deep guilt. Dumbledore uttered a name that Toby had only recently met. Harry Potter. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. 713 Treasure. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 713 Treasure, Harry Potter. It's already afternoon now, and Toby is walking on the street of Diagon Alley, muttering the name repeatedly. He left in a hurry and didn't even have time to say hello to Snape. He really wanted to see the expression on Snape's face when he was successfully applied for the job. But Toby's mind was now occupied by another name. Harry Potter. Why does the principal insist on mentioning Harry Potter? Does he also believe in the words of the Savior? Toby suddenly felt that the wizarding world was not worth saving, even Dumbledore had become old and confused. Toby's thoughts remained unchanged. Compared to Harry in his infancy, he would rather believe that James and Lily had defeated Voldemort. Both of them had excellent grades in school and played against him in every exam. Of course, James is a bit inferior. He is more focused on science and is best at shape-shifting. Only a few students are omnipotent, such as Lily, Lime Lupin, and Snape. As for the guilt in Dumbledore's eyes, Toby could understand part of it. He believed that James and Lily would undoubtedly join the Order of the Phoenix, but they both died in the war, and the child Harry left behind did not look well taken care of. Perhaps it is precisely because of this that Principal Dumbledore is filled with guilt towards Harry. Sir. Unconsciously, Toby had already walked to the counter of Gringotts, where he was still being entertained by the fairy from the morning. Oh, I'm here to pick up something. Toby came to his senses and said, 714 treasury, as soon as possible. The fairy named Lotzi was called over again, and his eyes were strange as he stared at Toby. He clearly remembered seeing each other only this morning, when Toby even took a large sum of gold. In just a little while, that money has been spent. This is really a generous guest. Lotzi's face showed a sincere smile, and Toby glanced at him without paying attention. The cart quickly set off and they walked through the dark corridor. Al hid in Toby's collar, his eyes wandering around, as if looking for an opportunity to take action. It wasn't until Toby patted twice that he regained his composure. "Here you are, sir." Lotzi got off the cart and said, opening the door of the vault. Toby remained motionless as before, and Al immediately jumped into the vault and swam happily among the coins. "Stop making trouble." Toby had to remind him once again, "Let's get down to business first, Al, hurry up and take out the things." Al made a leap and grabbed the cloth bag labeled with the number 1. He forcefully stuffed it into the pocket above his belly, and then stared at the pile of gold coins with reluctant eyes. Unfortunately, it couldn't fit any more. "It's time to go." Toby was about to walk in and catch Al, but in his spare time, he suddenly caught a glimpse of something unusual in the nearby vault. 2 figures, one tall and one short, walked out of the vault. In front of him was a fairy ring, while the person behind him hid his whole body in the pitch-black witch robe. That is the 713 vault that Hagrid only came this morning. This person is definitely not Hagrid, nor is he Dumbledore. The man in black also noticed Toby as he looked over. Fairy Lotzi also immediately reacted, grabbing the whistle from his chest and blowing it hard. The sound of the whistle echoed throughout the deep stream. "There's a thief! There's a thief! Help! There's a thief!" Suddenly, in the invisible darkness, a loud noise came from the goblin guards, who reacted quickly. Then, the black-clothed man and Toby raised their wands at the same time, and without hesitation, they fired spells at each other. Lotzi was hit by a stray spell, and immediately he was covered in large and painful chickenpox, as if his whole body was about to turn into a pustule bubble. Toby attacked silently, and he had faintly seen flames spraying from afar. The fire dragon was about to arrive. Shenfeng has no shadow. The divine blade shadowless curse successfully hit the opponent, and Toby heard a painful hissing. Armor protection. Immediately after, Toby loudly cast the iron armor curse. He only needed to continue dragging on for a while, but in the next second, he heard the other person shouting in a hoarse voice, "Avada! It's a deadly curse." Toby took a brisk step and jumped into the unopened vault. He waited anxiously for a while, then tentatively threw a bronze nade outside, but he heard nothing except the roar of the dragon, nor could he provoke the opponent to take action. He quietly revealed his head and found that the man in black had played a trick and disappeared. Is this person specifically here to steal the Philosopher's Stone? Half an hour later, Toby and Al sat in the highest-level reception hall of Gringotts. The fairy supervisor looked at each other with a headache. Just because Gringotts had been stolen was already bad enough, but unfortunately, the wizard they discovered was a customer of the same high level, and this person was still Toby. Even in the UK, the fairy supervisor has heard of Toby's reputation. He is an extremely excellent spell solver, and it is not an exaggeration to say that he is even the best. No matter which fairy recruits him, his performance will steadily increase due to greatly improved performance. This is an auspicious symbol in the Gringotts. More importantly, as a colleague, Toby is well aware of the negative impact this will have on Gringotts. The fairy supervisor said in an extremely sincere tone, "The details of the matter have been roughly investigated, and the pole ring is influenced by the soul-seizing curse, which is why he..." Toby suddenly extended his palm, and the fairy supervisor immediately seemed to be choked. 100 crowns, move my vault to a safer location, and this matter will be completely settled. The fairy supervisor had to endure heartache and agree, of course, even if it's for your heroic move, this bonus should still be worth it. Toby left Gringotts with a heavy heart. He didn't expect to meet the thief who wanted to take the Philosopher's Stone so soon, not long after Principal Dumbledore told him about it. But next time. Toby took the number 1 pocket handed by Al and took out a plain metal ball from inside. The ball was silver and covered in strange golden patterns. Toby tossed the ball up and down, slowly revealing a pale smile. Next time, it won't be so easy for you to escape. On the other hand, in an unknown dark room, Quirrell appeared panting, his heart filled with fear. He didn't expect his future colleague to be so powerful, still an excellent dueler. Where exactly did this Toby come from? But soon, the pain in the back of his head aroused deeper fear in Quirrell's heart. He cautiously walked to the middle of 2 mirrors, layer after layer, and opened the bloody headscarf. In the mirror, Quirrell had a face on the back of his head, which was as white as chalk, with 2 slender, snake-like nostrils below. Now, from the right eye to the corner of the left mouth of this face, a long diagonal cut has been made, and blood is continuously flowing out. Shenfeng Wuiying is a dark magic that cannot completely heal the wounds caused. Quirrell looked at the tightly closed eyes in his face in terror, and he shouted mournfully, "Master! Wake up! Master!" End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Layout. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Layout, that's it. At the innermost part of the room on the far right side of the 4th floor, the light scattered all over the walls slowly converged and concentrated on the metal ball in the center of the room's mid-air. Toby picked up the ball and handed it to Al to keep. He clapped his hands and said, "You should feel at ease now, Principal." As the new professor at Hogwarts, Toby also became a member of the protection team for the Philosopher's Stone. He knew the purpose of these rooms before rushing to Hogwarts, as they were specially arranged by professors to protect the Philosopher's Stone. Toby now believes this is necessary. He only recently told Principal Dumbledore about the thief breaking into Gringotts, a powerful dark wizard. Toby also recounted the incident of the shadowless spell hitting the opponent. If nothing unexpected happens, there will be a noticeable scar on the thief's body. Toby roughly measured the distance with his fingers and said, "It will be so long and difficult to cure. Scars will be left behind." "You did a great job, Toby," Principal Dumbledore said in a pun, not only for Toby's move to repel the thief, but also for Toby's excellent defense measures in the last room. Toby didn't feel smug, but asked seriously, "Who do you think the other person would be?" He couldn't imagine anyone forcing Nick Lemmy to seek help from Dumbledore. It's impossible to judge from the role of magic stones, just turning stones into gold and immortality is enough to attract too many people. I did make some guesses, but they were just guesses. More time is needed to confirm. Unconsciously, even I have established many enemies, and it's hard to say if I should feel honored about it. So it's more convenient to explore ancient magic, Toby joked at the right time, while also telling the truth. Living people are much more terrifying than dead people. Dumbledore remained silent for a moment, then let out a heavy sigh. "The living and the dead hope it's not the worst outcome," he said. "Can this have a worse outcome?" Toby couldn't figure it out. It's better to switch to a more relaxed topic. The solemn atmosphere swept away, and Dumbledore asked gently, "As the principal of Hogwarts, it's hard not to care about the quality of the professor's teaching. How are you doing with your lesson preparation? Bring it over and show it to me." Toby looked at Dumbledore with a skeptical gaze and said, "Are you serious about teaching quality? I still remember when I was in school, the level of those defense against the dark arts professors was completely uneven. It was not easy to achieve excellent grades in this course, it was simply the most difficult course, and one time I almost failed." "Oh." Dumbledore thought carefully and said, "Are you referring to Professor Anvers?" "I remember her, but I have to say that you did show enough courage in front of her, and Professor Anvers' performance was enough to satisfy me. For a whole year, she didn't really eat your liver." Do you know how difficult it is for a female yak? Toby instinctively asked, how difficult is it? Dumbledore smiled and said, it's even more difficult than James not showing off his Quidditch grades. Toby understood now. That's rare enough, it's almost as difficult as Snape to wash his hair honestly. The two of them laughed at the same time until a cold voice sounded. What's so funny? Maybe you should tell me too. Snape's figure appeared in the darkness, like an old bat, appearing silently. He was holding a bunch of bottles and jars in his hand, seemingly also to set up levels. Although both his and Toby's hair was long, Snape's hairstyle only made him appear more gloomy. Toby muttered softly next to Dumbledore, I'm going back on my word. I should say it's almost as difficult as Snape's haircut. Oh my goodness, it's been so many years and he still has this ugly hairstyle. Dumbledore's mouth twitched and he quickly coughed loudly a few times. Snape tightly pursed his lips, his face turning blue with anger. Remember to hand me your lesson notes, I'll leave first. You two old classmates, please continue to reminisce about the past. Toby noticed for the first time that Principal Dumbledore's footsteps were so fast that they disappeared in the blink of an eye. Toby Heimer. Snape gritted his teeth and said, as if he was about to throw the potion onto Toby. Severus Snape. Toby's attitude was much more enthusiastic than his, as if he had just discovered Snape. I have good news for you, I have officially become a professor at Hogwarts. Ancient Magic. It's not an elective course, just like you, it's a formal course. To be honest, Toby ignored Snape's almost murderous gaze and said, perhaps we should find an opportunity to gather with Professor Slughorn. We are all his proud disciples, and later he also helped us a lot. Many leave requests were successfully approved. Do you know where he lives? Snape stared fiercely at Toby without speaking. It seems you don't know. Toby said disappointedly, it's a shame that the dean used to take care of you so well, but you don't remember anything. You really make me feel unfamiliar now, Severus. Forget it, I'll go ask the principal. He must know where the dean lives. When Toby walked up to Snape, he suddenly said in an extremely gloomy tone, now I am the dean of Slytherin, Hammer. Toby jumped back to prevent Snape from really throwing the potion on him, which looked like poison. Hey! Toby's tone became sharper. You really shouldn't blame Lily's excellence on the dean. He just likes excellent students, and later it was up to you to decide not to attend the Snot Club's gatherings alone, having nothing to do with the dean. What's the point of complaining about him? He doesn't know you like him either. Bang! Bang! The medicine bottle exploded behind Toby, but it always fell one step behind, not even touching his clothes and feet. Al excitedly waved his little fist and spat out his tongue at Snape, transforming several faces in a short period of time. Don't thank me. Toby finally shouted, I will help you prepare a gift for the dean. When Toby ran down the hallway, he found Principal Dumbledore waiting for him outside. Severus is really passionate. Dumbledore sighed. Toby thought of Witch, the owner of the Vale Bar, who had said similar things before. Severus has always been like this. Toby smiled nonchalantly and said, everyone says that. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Lesson Preparation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Lesson Preparation. Although Toby returned to Hogwarts with the purpose of archaeology, as a formal professor, he also had to carefully prepare the teaching content. The spell solver is a position in the Gringotts of the Wizarding Bank. The cursor must be able to decipher the curses in ancient tombs or other historical sites and bring the treasure back to the Gringotts. This is a very dangerous and serious profession, and they may be killed by ancient curses, poisons, or curses in their work, but the corresponding rewards are also very generous. Toby doesn't like the title of a curse solver. He prefers to call himself an archaeologist, and his articles published in magazines alone deserve this reputation, although he rarely does so later on. Later on, Toby had more academic exchanges with Dumbledore in his cover letters, which greatly benefited him. The principal does not like his research, but in terms of magic, he is always willing to bring him some novel ideas, which are very interesting and inspiring. If it weren't for receiving feedback, Toby wouldn't have persisted in writing a cover letter for so many years. Of course, he also played a trick in the letter, not mentioning his job application at the beginning, but pretending to mention it unintentionally in the last few lines. Principal Dumbledore always ignored the last few lines until this year when he changed his mind and agreed to let Toby return to Hogwarts. Regarding lesson preparation, although Toby considers himself the only archaeologist in the wizarding world, it is clearly not suitable for teaching. For students, it is all beyond the scope of the curriculum, and there are not so many ancient relics waiting for students to excavate. It is difficult to deal with the dangers hidden in the relics alone. So, Toby planned to split archaeologists into two parts, one of which was ancient magic, which was also the main content, including Toby's own pursuit of magic concepts, which students would inevitably encounter in the process of exploring relics in the future. The other part is the adventure that Toby personally experienced, which is not detailed in Ancient Magic. It is only occasionally mentioned, and some even directly capture some fragments, appearing endless. But this also happens to prevent those malicious black wizards from finding the specific location of the ruins, who knows what they will find. Toby had witnessed some of its power with his own eyes, and even a smaller part was kept in his collection in the treasury of the Gringotts. Once the crazy black wizard gains something from it, it is definitely a consequence that Toby does not want to see. As for the content to be taught during the formal class, it is very simple. In fact, Toby has already prepared it and wrote it all in his book Ancient Magic. It is not difficult to extract 7 academic years of courses from it. Moreover, Toby does not need to complete the first year of study because it is a completely new course. Whether facing 7th grade students or freshmen, he only needs to prepare similar courses, but the difficulty needs to be slightly changed. For example, the introductory course of Ancient Magic is also the simplest one. Magic Formation. Freshmen need to successfully draw a magic formation of floating spells, while 7th grade students will have to learn more complex things, such as flying spells, transformation techniques, and even phantom shape-shifting, all of which need to be prepared in advance. I don't know if the students will like this course. Toby was a little uneasy, but the thought of even Snape becoming a potion professor and becoming the dean of Slytherin College, combined with the bizarre professor of defense against the dark arts that Toby encountered during his time in school. To be honest, Toby feels that no matter how bad he is no less than a female Yiksha, right? Not to mention that pale-faced vampire, like Mother Yiksha, their gaze at students was like that of food, and they never dined with them to avoid disgust. Upon careful consideration, the professors in this course are really scarce. I hope my new colleague can persist for a longer time. Should that be possible? That Quirrell is not easy at first glance. If it weren't for being sharp enough, Toby wouldn't have been fooled by him. Toby believed in his intuition, and this talent saved him many times during his exploration of ancient ruins, making it one of his few divination talents. And all of this can be attributed to his wand. 12¼ inches long, with a core that is the heart and nerve of a fire dragon, extremely powerful, capable of unleashing magnificent magic. The most important thing is Toby's wand wood. Black walnut. Black walnut is not as common as ordinary walnut wands, it generally seeks its owner with keen intuition and insight. It looks beautiful, but it's not easy to control. Black walnut also has an obvious quirk, which is that it cannot coordinate internal conflicts properly. If its owner deceives itself, its power will be greatly reduced. This requires Toby to be honest with himself and others, and must have sufficient self-awareness. Once he successfully achieves it, the black walnut wand will become the most loyal and influential among all wands, and will have special talents in all types of spells. Although these honesty may not be appreciated at times, such as Snape, Toby still did a good job, allowing the black walnut wand to exert its rightful power and save the day in many experiences. Toby is an honest Slytherin who had a small scholarship during his school years, but he would rather use second-hand textbooks and a witch robe, or even a feather pen, to have his own wand. He had enough of the hard times, so now he has chosen the office he had long admired, which is the one owned by Dean Slughorn. This office is located on the 7th floor of the castle, with a wide view, and is also very large, larger than the principal's office. It is the largest office that Toby has ever seen. Professor Slughorn is a very enjoyable person. Toby heard that he left Hogwarts the same year Voldemort was defeated. He doesn't know why the dean chose to retire, but this office is still cheaper for him. Toby has no intention of suffering, simply exploring ancient relics is already difficult enough, and often cannot afford a normal meal for many days. So he really couldn't understand that Snape's office was in the basement, even the potion classroom was there, cold and humid, and he would freeze his hands and feet in winter. Haven't he lived enough in the Slytherin dungeon yet? The dungeon is not as comfortable as the 7th floor. Toby leaned against the velvet sofa and rested his legs on a footstool, feeling warm all over. Al also enjoyed his fortune, holding up a pile of multi-flavored beans in his left hand and another pile in his right hand, throwing them one by one into the sky, then catching them with his mouth, and then making a scream. At $$%. $#. It spoke incomprehensible words and tightly grasped its neck with both hands. But Toby unexpectedly understood. This is so spicy that I probably tasted the taste of Mexican chili. Toby calmly snapped his fingers, and immediately a domestic elf jumped out of the air. A glass of ice milk, Toby asked. The domestic elf bowed deeply, and when he returned, he was holding a glass of cold milk in his hand. Elfie quickly took several sips, gradually reducing the spicy taste in his mouth. Then it lay slippery on the coffee table and let out a comfortable burp. %UN at 34%. Al started talking nonsense again. Yeah, Tabizan said together, this place is indeed much better than Egypt, and the weather is not that hot. But don't just know how to enjoy it, we still have serious things to do. This is Hogwarts, and there are undiscovered treasures everywhere. I have a few suspicious locations now, and I need you to find opportunities. The domestic elf suddenly coughed hard a few times. Toby gave him a strange look and said, "Why haven't you left yet?" "Sir," the domestic elf bowed again, "the principal asked you to give him your lesson notes." After a pause, he added, "As soon as possible." "Got it." Toby impatiently waved his hand and muttered in a low voice after the house elf left, "Why haven't you seen him so concerned about the professor's lesson preparation before?" The deliciousness of blood can also be considered formal content. He still remembers the vampire professor with a nostalgic expression on his face. He's so greedy to see it. Toby helplessly took the notebook from the oak coffee table, and the feather pen sandwiched in the middle stood up immediately, eager to write the content. However, the position where it is sandwiched is still the first page, and even blank. The teaching content of Hogwarts professors varies. Some have strong operability, such as using magic wands in shape-shifting and spell classes. Some have a lot of theoretical content, and the most prominent one is the course of magic history, which is all things that need to be remembered and memorized. There is also a part that depends on talent, such as divination classes. There are also comprehensive courses, and the magic potion course is a comprehensive category, which includes both operations and the need to remember the uses and processing methods of various raw materials. Ancient magic is also a comprehensive category, and Toby has made up his mind that the teaching content will be completely different for each academic year. This is actually somewhat like his defense against the dark arts class in school, with a completely different teaching style and a different professor every year. However, there is still a difficult problem to solve, which is the textbook. Toby has put a lot of effort into the book Ancient Magic, including not only some magical knowledge but also many exploratory experiences. However, Toby always remembered Principal Dumbledore's advice, so the content of Ancient Magic was incomplete, which led to a poor reading experience and low sales of the book. If it weren't for Toby accidentally saving the life of a publishing house owner, his book wouldn't even have been published smoothly. More ideas only exist in Toby's heart and in the letters exchanged with Principal Dumbledore. But now, Toby muttered for a moment. Now that Dumbledore has sent him back to Hogwarts, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal to have him teach some extra content, does it? Al glanced askance at the feather pen that was vigorously writing, as well as the excited gaze behind its scattered long hair. It lazily yawned and didn't want to care about anything, just wanted to get a good sleep. An hour later, Toby's lesson notes were handed over to Dumbledore's desk. Dumbledore roughly flipped through it, but before he could put his notes back on the table, he was grabbed by the other hand without hesitation. Snape frowned and read for a while. The longer he read, the deeper his brow furrowed. "Do you really want him to teach these things in the classroom?" he asked with a gloomy expression. "He will be targeted, your indulgence will kill him." Dumbledore looked at him seriously and said, "I really didn't know you cared about Toby, Severus. I thought your relationship wasn't good. I wish I could let him die." Snape gritted his teeth and said, "You shouldn't have let him come back. What good is this for you? It's not just about benefits." Dumbledore shook his head and said, calmly facing Snape's angry gaze, "We both know that Toby is not a hypocritical person. He is too sincere enough not to lie. Unless he is driven away, I cannot decide what he will teach in class. I believe Toby himself is aware of this. Promoting hypocritical ideas is even more painful than killing him. He won't compromise, otherwise he wouldn't have been unwilling to return to Hogwarts or even England for so many years. Why do you still want him to come back?" Snape stared closely at Dumbledore. Dumbledore let out a heavy sigh, his eyes filled with sadness. "The reason is as simple as ever," he said. "War has not only brought you trauma, but I am also saddened by it. Many people are proclaiming that we have won, but I am well aware that one day, Voldemort will come back with even greater power. In my opinion, the war of the past was just a failed one. We need to be prepared in advance and reduce more sacrifices. That's why I brought Toby back. He trusted me and deserves the same level of trust from me. Just like you, Severus. I know you hate him, but you also trust Toby." Snape paid no attention to the last paragraph of the waiting list and said, "I remember you said you were waiting for Toby to give you a satisfactory answer himself. Have you waited now?" "Yes. Yes, Severus, I did say that. It wasn't until Toby appeared that I fully understood. He hasn't changed for so many years. I think this is enough to satisfy me. At least it hasn't deepened the gap between teachers and students, and I feel fortunate for it. Go ahead, Severus." Dumbledore finally said, looking out the window. Snape lowered his head and thought for a while, but could only look at him together. Just outside the gate of Hogwarts, there stood a restless figure. Even if just looking from afar, it could be seen that this was a timid person like a mouse. "It's time to welcome our Professor of Black Magic Defense," Dumbledore said. End of this chapter.